You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 63, we'll be going around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news. We'll take a look back at the Contenders Korea semifinal matches, and the host will share their Overwatch League rankings ahead of Season 2 for our teams ranked number 15 through number 11. But before we can do that and introduce you to my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us for our live show tonight on Twitch, and thank all of our repeat listeners. So as you can tell, we actually have a full house tonight. All three of the hosts are back for the first time since probably late November at this point. It's been a couple of episodes. Obviously, we've kind of, we had the holidays going on, and you guys were kind of like alternating who was going to be in Abyss each week, but the game is all here. I'm super excited, and we had some awesome Contenders Korea action, and, a little bit of shenanigans on the Overwatch League side with, Pro Pugs, which was entertaining in its own ways, which we'll definitely be getting into. But, Slambo, always good to have you back. How has the past week been treating you, my friend?
Oh, what's up, nerd? And yeah, I mean, the Abyss is fine. It's been treating me. I'm pretty used to it. I think there's anyone here who has the most time and experience in the Abyss. It's me. So I feel like I'm the most apt to speak on it. Okay, and it's been just fine. It was a nice little visit there. Despite my efforts to avoid Spider, no, I'm just kidding. I honestly am so excited to have the gang all back together again, and we have, I think a fairly jam-packed episode, like a lot of goings on for Overwatch. We're getting closer and closer to the preseason, so it's nice to kind of have this steady cascade of information that we have. So looking forward to get to that. And Totem, this is, we've got about an hour and a half left of friendship and civility until it becomes playoff week for both of our teams. So our teams in the National Football League will be meeting this coming Sunday. And so, yeah, me and Totem are cool right now, amicable. But as soon as this is over, frankly, he's dead to me until about 9 o'clock Eastern once the football game is over. And then no matter what the outcome of the game is, Totem, we're cool. We're family. I mean, until then. Anyway, good to be here, Totem.
Absolutely. So joining back with us yet again is our other co-host, Spider. And Spider, we're all caught up on YouTube. We got our other Overwatch Recall interviews out. I know you've been kind of leveling one of your alt accounts, but how's this past week been for you?
It's actually been pretty good. I mean, after the whole holidays and stuff, there was a little bit of like de-stress, and then we start the new year cleaning, and we went through all our clothes over the weekend and got rid of all that. And then in between, like you said, I've been leveling the alt account, and I've kind of gotten to the point now where I feel good at playing tank, that I've got that confidence level. Like when I play DPS, I have that confidence level. I kind of know where I should position. At least I think I do. Now, I'll go through placements and place like bronze or something, and then completely subvert expectations and stuff. But right now, like when I'm playing in quick play and stuff, I'm playing with like flats, maybe like low diamonds, which is kind of what I feel like I am as a tank. I do make mistakes. Like I throw out Earth Shatters like they're free candy. Like I'm like, I got Earth Shatter, here we go. And I'm like, oh wait, nobody was there. Okay, whatever. So I still have a lot to improve on, but it's been really good. And the highlight for me this week was actually the Pro Pugs, because I didn't stream on Friday night like I normally did. And I made that pretty clear because there was just so much going on. I mean, we had like Korea Contenders Finals, and then we had Pro Pugs, which I kind of bounced back and forth. But in the end, I ended up settling on Pro Pugs and then going back and watching the Contenders Finals, because the Pro Pugs were just so entertaining. And I don't know if it was just like the clash of like egos and personalities and stuff, it was just so funny to watch like all these pro players just be themselves. Like
Right.
Surefour, like every game they were like, oh, we need a diva player. Surefour's like, I can play diva, and he played diva, and then like the next game they're like, oh, we need a DPS, and Surefour's like, I can play DPS, and they're like, it just every game, and there were multiple people that did that, and it was so funny that you would see like Linkster going up against like Kareev, and then Kareev would beat Linkster, and you're like, wow, maybe my preconceived notions the last season were totally like blown out of proportion, and it was really the team that was carrying them. And that's an odd sentence to say for the Outlaws, because the Outlaws, were mediocre at best. But it was fun. So I would. We're going to talk a little bit about the Pro Pugs, but I would highly encourage most people to go back and at least watch a couple of the matches. Like it was like 2 hours. They got like an interview with Nate Nanzer in there, which we will talk about that. But the actual games are hilarious to watch, just like the call outs and stuff like that. And Jane's like little interjections here and there are great. So overall, it's been a fun week in Overwatch.
That is awesome. Well, we have had quite a bit kind of going on in regards to the public test realm, and I know we normally don't really discuss patch notes or anything on this particular podcast, but I feel like these changes are impactful enough where we should probably kind of look at the changes and what the impact is kind of going to be at that pro level. So, we're going to go by these one by one, and some of these are going to be a lot bigger than some of the other changes. One of them's probably not going to matter at all at the pro level, just because of the hero. And if you watch the Pro Pugs, you probably heard Jake completely trashing this hero altogether and his toolkit. But let's talk about some of the changes. So first up, the damage reduction from armor was reduced from -5 to -3. So just as a reminder, I feel like before I actually talk about the change itself, we gotta kind of remind everyone how exactly armor works in Overwatch. So armor is depleted before health, but after shields. But that doesn't factor in with temporal shields like Zarya and Zenyatta. So armor is basically blocking a certain amount of damage every shot, and then armor can block 5 damage from every hit that deals 10 damage or more. And basically, if it deals less than 10 damage, then that damage is basically going to be halved instead. So armor is pretty effective against rapid-fire weapons, shotguns, not so good against weapons that deal a large amount of damage in one shot. So you're basically talking about snipers. So for the heroes that have armor, that includes Bastion, D.Va, Rein, Winston, Orisa, Wrecking Ball, Brigitte, and a lot of the hero damage is going to fluctuate due to this change, and it's going to be dependent on the pellet damage of the heroes. So, for example, you have Widowmaker, who only has 1 pellet, but you have shotgun heroes, like Doomfist, Reaper, Roadhog. So they have a large amount of pellets, but that does fewer damage, so the armor reduces their damage more. So what exactly is that going to mean for the game? Well, some heroes are going to be pretty big beneficiaries of this, so you'll see Orisa having about a 33% damage increase against armor targets. Hammond, it only really impacts his criticals, but at a very high rate. He's actually the highest differential here at 40% when you're landing criticals. But there are, other heroes that maybe aren't really going to see play at the pro level, like Moira, for instance. Her grasp is actually going to be doing a considerable amount of damage increase, upwards of 35%. So, if you're silver to gold, or maybe even plat in some cases, you might be seeing a ton of DPS Moiras, more so than you already are at this point. But we have seen, kind of across the board, they are trying to change the landscape of the meta. And we are going to maybe see a fluctuation of different comps where maybe, triple tank, triple support isn't going to be the go-to in every situation. But Spider, I don't know if you've been on the PTR, but out of all of the changes, do you feel like this one is going to have the biggest impact with the game itself?
Yes and no. I feel like all the changes together kind of make the change that we're looking for. I think this is obviously the most mathematical change. This is the one most people are thinking about. this is the one that they're, this is the one people are really making a big deal, other than the Reaper change, which people are blowing out of proportion. But I mean, this is big because it changes how impactful armor is as a whole. I mean, armor not only negates damage, but it actually increases healing. Like, it increases effective healing. So when you heal somebody that is still in the armor range, you're technically healing for more than you would if they were in, regular health range. Just the way armor works. So as a whole, I think this is a good change. Like you said, this will bring what people consider like lower damage heroes. I wouldn't say more into the meta, but it gives them a little boost. Like you said, Hammond will get a nice significant boost if he's hitting headshots. Sombra is the same way. Like, Sombra gets a bigger boost if she's hitting headshots. And these are two characters that are traditionally known to counter goats, which is honestly what this patch is about. This patch is like trying to limit the ability for goats to be ran in every situation. I feel like this helps it, but this alone isn't enough to get rid of it, because if you look at this in a vacuum, like if this was the only change, all it really does is it just changes how survivable tanks are. And if both teams' tanks are less survivable, that doesn't change anything. They're still on the same level playing field. So, and I don't think this is a big enough buff to the other characters to push, goats out of it. And you mentioned Moira, and Moira is actually something I wanted to talk about, because a lot of people have been kind of back and forth on Moira because they don't understand how Moira works. She's going to be doing more damage, but it doesn't really change any other part of her kit. Like, her biotic grasp will not heal for more, because it's not technically a life steal like Reaper's is. It just heals a flat amount per, tick, which is basically 30 healing per second. And she will not get any more resource per damage. It's basically 12.5 resource per second. So nothing on Moira is changed other than damage. So, like you said, people in silver, gold, plat, we will see more damage Moiras. But a lot of people will misconstrue that to being like, oh, well, I can do more healing, or I'm living longer. That's not the case. But as a whole, I think this is a good change. I think armor as a whole is what made goats so strong. So I think this, coupled with some of the other changes, will be enough to not kill goats. Like, I want to get this out of the way very early. Like, we are going to see goats in Season 1 of Overwatch League, just because of so many teams have been
Season 1, huh?
Season 2, Stage 1. Sorry. I already made the first.
Lambo?
I know, right? Stage 2, Season 2, Stage 1. Okay, got it. Because so many teams have been practicing it, and that's what they're going to feel comfortable with. What this is going to open is it's going to open doors for, like, dive comps on certain maps where teams are, like, more comfortable with dive. Like, think First Point Gibraltar and stuff like that, where snipers are, maybe First Point Hanamura, and, things like that. So we are still going to see goats even after this patch hits, if they play on this patch, which is still a big if. But I think this is a step in the right direction with the other stuff.
I think it's going to add, like, possibly a little bit more diversity, and that's all. Like, that's really my biggest point, is to what you just said there, Spider, where you're saying, depending on the map, depending on the situation, there's going to be a little bit of an increase in some more non-traditional comps or heroes, a la the Torbjorns, the Bastions, the Reapers, that Orisa coming into the mix. I feel like some more double shield comps protecting that Presidente again. Again, I guess maybe it's not even fun or fair or safe at this point to make conjectures of, like, the compositions we're going to see based on it. But I do think that it's going to just allow for a little bit more diversity at some point. That's my hope. The other, like, big thing is, I guess, to me, Spider, it was one of the things that in my mind that I wanted to bring up, and you did too, is the impact that it has on healers. I mean, if it overall looks like a DPS increase and armor nerf, that means that there's going to be possibly a little bit more of a need for burst healing, because people are going to be kind of losing that armor a little bit more quickly. Now, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that now you can chip armor quicker, so Mercies are going to want you to kind of put the shield down a little more, per se, or chip a little more, because now that armor is going to fall off so easy, and they're going to be able to top their healing off or their ults off a lot quicker. So I don't know. I'm interested to see kind of the impact that it has on the healer. If anything, all of these increases, like, it's between like the 20 to 30% range numbers are the ones that stand out as like DPS increases. But I don't know if like that is going to make a ton of difference in a game that's already so fast. We're talking 1 or 2 more shots, 1 or 2 more bullets in certain situations, which after all this talk and all this chatter about the stats, it might just feel a little negligible. Like I also can think that might be the case. You know, I haven't played a ton on the PTR, so I can't speak to it personally. And we're not really going to know. We're going to know like for our skill brackets how it feels, but it's really once it gets into the pro swimming pool is how we know how it's going to be shaped. So we have a lot of like wait and see, but obviously that's what we're doing here, just doing a little bit of conjecture and a little bit of thought. But it's certainly, I think we just need to pay attention to the impact on healing, and maybe again, this change by itself, not much of an impact at all. And to Spider's earlier point, maybe it's this change connected with some other things on the patch notes. All right, that's all I got.
So moving on to the next change, they're going to be looking at Brigitte's rally. So rally will now have a maximum duration of 30 seconds. Okay, so what does that mean for the landscape of Overwatch, you know, at basically every level? Well, it means that rally will now only affect one team fight rather than rolling over into additional fights. So as I mentioned earlier, you have, you know, heroes like Zenyatta and Zarya, who this is going to impact more so than some of the other heroes, just because they benefited from having armor underneath their temporal shields. So when it comes to Snowball, there's going to be less Snowball value between team fights, you know, because it's not going to just exist time and time again. So that 30-second window is never going to be enough where you can cap a point and then get to the next point and make, you know, an actual attempt at getting a point B. So that assault snowball is going to be a little bit lessened by this. But across the board, like Brigitte, you know, her healing output, because it's pure, a lot of it is armor based, that's going to be a little bit less effective. And, you know, just the effectiveness of armor pack is going to see a reduction as well. But for me, like, the thing is, like, when we were talking about the Brigitte changes in the past, I was always kind of weirded with how they went about doing it, because I always thought that the rally in itself was one of the more impactful things out of her toolkit. Yes, you know, she could still delete 150 health hero, but the rally being able to kind of coexist fight after fight, and then let's say you only have to use like one ultimate to win the next fight. Well, that just means, you know, the team that is trying to attack is still having to deal with that armor time and time again. You know, the snowball value was just too great. So I thought the rally should have been the first thing that they should have tweaked, rather than kind of, you know, going at each individual thing. But now we see, like, the cultivation, all of that, and maybe this is going to be the thing that puts Brigitte in that sweet spot where people aren't going to feel like she is overpowered. But I have to say, like, even with this, with everything her toolkit offers, I don't know how drastic of a drop she's going to be seeing in pro play.
I don't think she'll see a huge drop from this alone. I think overall we might see a drop here and there. Just going back to our, you know, what we were talking about, but will be more map dependent. I think this was a good change. I think this needed to happen, just because there is no other ultimate in the game that lasts forever. Like, they're all time based, regardless of what they do. So the fact that Brigitte could get her ultimate, use it, and then get another one before the first one wore off was insane. Like, there are other heroes that could possibly do that, like Ashe if she's really going crazy. But overall, like, that's not a realistic scenario where this was. Basically, you would end up, and this is why GOATs got so popular, you would end up with basically almost an unkillable Zarya and a Zenyatta, because they were basically feeding off of that shield, and then they still had all that armor on underneath. So it's crazy to think that this was in the game this long, and it really brings into, like, the forefront how strong Brigitte has been and how weird of an approach they took, like you said. So I think this was a good change. I think, you know, I have no problem with this. The only thing I wish they would do, and, you know, we'll see how the meta shakes out, but I feel like they should revert one of the previous changes, like maybe cap it back at 150 like it was originally, and then still have it drop off. Because right now, this could leave her in, kind of a very underpowered state, depending on how the meta shifts and stuff like that. And I think our goal as Overwatch fans is to see every character have a possibility of being played in certain situations. Like, we'd love to see, Symmetra on a defense. We'd love to see Torbjorn, outside of Numbani on maybe like one or two other maps. But it's cool that at least they have those. Like right now, the problem with Brigitte is it's like, oh, just go Brigitte forehead and we win. So I think, overall this was a good change.
I think exactly the last little bit to me is all I have to add, because you guys really nailed the most important things. But, I don't think any of us wanted her to be nerfed into non-existence, right? That's exactly what I wanted to say, is we just wanted her to not be just always kind of like that safety valve to that, to exactly to your last point too, is that it just seems that we consistently just rely on Brigitte so much, not only in just our pug games, pickup games, and in our competitive matchmaking, but we see it relied upon so much in the pro scene. So I'm hoping this change just reduces the pick percentage, and that ultimately I think is all I'm asking for. Is again going back to that word diversity, just looking for a little bit more of a mix up, and not just so much of almost a guarantee I'm going to see Brigitte for at least 50% of every map. But yeah, I mean, pretty good change, but she's not going to be off the board. I don't think at all. She'll still be around, folks. She's not going anywhere.
So next up we have D.Va, who has had her defense matrix cooldown increase from 1 second to 2 seconds. Okay, so this one, I'm hearing a lot of different things from people. Some people feel like it's a bigger change than some of the other ones. Some people don't think it's going to make that much of an impact. I would say, in my opinion, at the pro level, I don't think this is going to be a very drastic change in regards to any sort of pick rate. What it will do, though, is kind of open up things for some other heroes to shine whenever defense matrix is on cooldown. So, Slambo, when it comes to setting up team fights, how much easier do you think it's going to be for these teams to execute any sort of, like, wombo combo, knowing that, hey, D.Va just used defense matrix, now we have a window for us to actually move in?
I feel like I've heard it both ways. I feel like people are saying this is kind of a really, really good thing or a really, really bad thing for D.Va. But I really fixate on exactly what the question you're posing to me is this really just going to show us a lot more of those wombo combo team fights? Are we going to see a lot more of just the Zarya setups, where a lot of the times, I feel like sometimes we miss a Graviton Surge even being eaten by a D.Va. I mean, I know it's in the kill feed now, and it's very apropos that it is, because it's a lot harder to do it, I believe, now. So at the higher levels, yes, I feel like this is going to allow for teams to really put together some really cool offenses, some really cool ult synergies. And they've always been there. But again, a really great D.Va player is going to shut down maybe one or two of those a map, whether it be the Deadeye, the Tactical Visor, the Barrage, whatever it might be. Like, those are still, going to have as much of an effect as ever, because I guess the Graviton Surge is the one, you've got a short window in which you need to land that in the right place at the right time to get everybody, especially after the range nerf that's hit Graviton Surge. You've really got to find that window. Or some of those other ults I listed, you can still, as a D.Va player, pick up 75% of that ultimate. They may get some of the barrage off, or you may have to time when you matrix with the Deadeye, or how much of the soldier ult you want to clean up. But most of it you can absorb even without with a late reaction or missing some of it. But with the Zarya Graviton, which really sets up a lot of really fun plays to watch, that one is very time specific, and I just feel like with a 2 second or with a 1 second cooldown or 2 second cooldown, I feel like there's just an eternity to work with. And I don't know, I feel like this is going to change how D.Va players manage their matrix to a certain extent, because they're going to have to hold it down for a slightly bit longer in order to maybe catch something, or it's like the reverse of holding your shield up as a Rhine. You want them to think you're going to cancel it, but you're going to hold it down, which is going to eat at your bar. So I just feel like the implications for how you manage your bar are definitely there. Probably a subtle change, but still a change. And, Toto, my last thing is that if you notice the direction the NFL has gone as a spectator sport, it's all about offense. It's all about that offense. The top 4 offenses made it to the conference championships and potentially the Super Bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if this means we get some cooler plays and some more Twitch clips that are worth watching the next day on the front page, I'm not mad at it.
Yeah, we're here
All
for
right?
the big plays.
I'm here for the big plays, and I feel like if that makes it a little bit more of a level playing field, instead of you just don't have to have the best diva on the field to counter everything, I'm all in. I like it.
Yeah, and I love Diva. Like, she's been one of my favorite heroes since launch, but I think it's time that they need to start making these changes. They need to get her out of the meta right now. She's been the mainstay through every meta we've had in Overwatch League. Every meta we've had pretty much prior to Overwatch League. There's only been a few periods here and there where she hasn't. So I think this is the start of it. But I totally agree with you, Totem, that 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 this is not enough to bring her out of the meta. What this is going to do is this is going to affect, some of the lower elo hero people who play her. It's going to be a little harder to eat that stuff. But the pros are going to figure this out real quick. They're going to figure out, how they game it, like Slambo said. And, the mind games will continue just with slightly less resources. So I think this is a step in the right direction, but not everything Diva needs to be even.
Yeah, so basically what this means for Diva players is you're just not going to be able to really spam the Matrix on and off to try to extend its uptime. But when it comes to Diva herself and her pick rate, she's still really the only mobile off-tank in the game. Well, that kind of depends on how you classify Wrecking Ball, but, for the pro players, they're just going to be a little bit more precise. They're going to have to deal more with their, in-game sense when it comes to when they actually need to be using it. So I still feel like Defense Matrix, regardless of this change, still offers just too much utility to really see Diva fall out of the meta right now. And, as we mentioned in the past, like, when it comes to Diva's one of the harder heroes to kind of balance just because, you have her mech, then you have Baby Diva, and she is essentially 2 heroes in 1. So, last up, the other change is to Reaper, who has had his lifesteal increase from 30% to 50% of damage dealt. So, Spider, I'm sure all of us have been on the competitive Overwatch Reddit. I'm sure we've all seen the clips of Reaper in the middle of a full team. He goes in, he pops his ultimate, he heals for like 2200 HP, and then everyone's like, oh my god, Reaper is unkillable.
He's highly killable. Highly killable still. So he with these changes, they did change it from 30 to 50, and that looks big on paper. Like he's effectively doing more damage against armored targets now because of the armor nerf, which means that he has more lifesteal, all of that. But when you get down to it, this doesn't address the problem with Reaper. The problem with Reaper is he is still a highly short-range hero that is highly suspect to being CC'd, being sniped, being, slammed in the face by 3 tanks, because Reaper's really good against 1 tank. He's okay against 2, but once you have 3 just beating on him, it doesn't matter if he has 80% lifesteal. Eventually, those tanks are going to win. All this does is it keeps him alive longer in those high tank situations. Now, it does make him better in some situations. Like, I think we'll see the return of, like, Anubis B Reaper and, areas of the map, kind of going back to our previous, conversation, areas in maps where he doesn't have to close the distance, where he can attack from multiple angles. It's, close range. Like, I could see, like, Nepal Control Center. That could be a good map for Reaper because he has multiple areas of attack and he doesn't have to as long as he stays out of that middle room, he has room to work. But Shadow Step still doesn't do anything. It has like one or two uses, but if the team figures out where you're attacking from, like if they have anybody scouting, they'll know where you're coming from, and they'll just obliterate you before that ability goes off.
Not only that too, but for something that's supposed to be like a sneak ability, it's also very loud.
It's like the Sombra when she first came out, where she's like halfway across the map and she's like, "I've been here all along." You're like, "Oh, she's over here. Okay, cool." You're exactly right. So I don't think this is what Reaper needed. Like it's nice. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy playing Reaper, but only on like one specific point, or in mystery heroes when the enemy team is like rolling up with like 5 DPS heroes and you can just walk through them. Other than that, this isn't going to change his use in pro play. I mean, you alluded to Jake just making fun of him, and that's literally what he did. He was like, Sureforce shouldn't have picked Reaper because Reaper's a bad hero. And I'm like, dude, Nate Nanzer's like sitting right there, and you're like, this is a terrible change. Like, this did nothing for him. So I am happy to see that they are looking to buff Reaper, but this was not the way to do it.
I mean, I guess you said it, Totem, but maybe we just see Reaper a little more for parts of maps, and I'm okay with that. I don't need Reaper to be buffed into infinity so he can compete with McCree in the mid-range game as well. It's not what I was thinking I wanted, but excuse me, I feel like most importantly, he's just got the most useless ability. There's got to be something better than Shadow Step. There's got to be a better way. And I saw a suggestion on Reddit. I forget if it was on the competitive Overwatch subreddit or if it was on just the actual Overwatch Reddit. But they said, like, let him turn into a bat for like 8 seconds or 6 seconds and then make his hitbox really small, still like hittable, but really small, so he can get kind of onto ledges or make some kind of flashy plays at time. Then you can kind of control that. You can move like at increased movement speed. And I thought, maybe that's not the answer, but I certainly was like, I feel like if that was in the game today, that's certainly better than what we have, which, it's a move to help me get back from spawn a little quicker, or for me to kind of neglect my team to set up a big ultimate. It's perfect for like those type of flanks. But ideally, that's where, like Reaper, with these type of quote unquote buffs, a lot of players are going to be playing him in like, competitive games, assuming that now he can just like walk into 5 heroes face first and just, I'm going to heal myself, and I know that's not what this is about. I don't know why I'm whining about my own competitive, life, but I don't know. I think I use that point to illustrate that I don't think that this change is as intense as some people read it. And I think Reaper's got other glaring issues if we expect to see him in a higher pick percentage. But for now, I'm going to be happy seeing him a little bit more. And King's Row, first point, is one of my favorites. I know we mentioned a lot of points, but that's one of my favorite spots. I think Reaper had a place there for a long time. And we've seen him there a couple times, but I would really like to see him be kind of a staple on defense in King's Row. First point. And then after that, you better switch, son.
I mean, it's Evil John even, you could just take Shadow Step. In our chat, it's Evil John said, like, just make it shorter, but make it easily interruptible. Quiet it down, make it shorter, just make it a little snappier. He's supposed to be like a wraith, so he's supposed to be able to move around. I do like the Alucard suggestion of turning into a bat.
I mean, he's already draining life like a madman now. He's really, truly Dracula. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So I think he is like next in line for the, at least somewhat rework. So just double down on that Dracula vibe, and it'll be fine.
So something that we haven't talked about is, a certain composition that revolves around Reaper. Now, I know at the pro level, we're probably not going to see the return of Beyblade. We're not going to see the nano boost going into the Death Blossom. Also, with the speed boost from the Lucio setting the play up. But it does open up that possibility at maybe some of the lower tiers. So I'm curious to see whether or not that composition is going to be viable. But across the board at the pro level, probably not going to be seeing a huge influx in regards to like a pick rate for Reaper. So all that stuff, guys, is on the PTR as of last Monday. So if you haven't yet, go check it out. And it is the PTR, so chances are everything that's on there now is just going to get patched straight to live, because that always seems to happen during the PTR testing. But moving on, it's been a pretty busy week for contenders. We have Playoff Central basically across the globe right now. And we had Europe and North America both wrap up, and it was Team Giganti beating Angry Titans in the Contenders EU Finals with a scoreline of 4-2. And I have to say, like, out of all the finals, EU, I feel like I didn't have as much invested in the EU Finals, but I did enjoy that series more so than a series between two teams that I really do enjoy seeing play. So, this is the return of, the Giganti Championship. They won a Contenders Season 1 back in 2017. They also finished as a runner-ups in the first season of this past year. And following their win, Giganti went out and they revealed some additional staff members that had helped pave the way towards their victory. And one of those names is one that we are all familiar with. It is a former Overwatch League player who played for the Florida Mayhem, that being none other than their tank player, Swoosh. So he is now a member of their coaching staff, and if you've been on his Twitter account, in the bio it says that he is the head coach of Team Giganti. I know they also had picked up Immortal, serving as a temporary addition to their coaching staff earlier this season, and Swoosh had joined the team during the third week of the season, so while it wasn't a full season gig for him, he was there for a majority of the matches. Now, we do have an update for Giganti, and that is the fact that they are going to be competing again here very soon, and that will be in Jane's Tournament of Future Champions. They'll be competing in the EU tournament, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure it was set for the 12th and the 13th, but a lot of people have been tweeting that it was delayed, but I haven't actually seen a tweet from Jane himself saying that. So you might want to keep an eye on that. But, a lot of the times, we really haven't seen direct success for pro players getting into a new role. And this is really, the first time that we're starting to see that. So do you feel like this is going to open up more opportunities for pro players if they're looking to pursue another option?
I'll just jump in real fast and say that I think this certainly accelerates that path for some people in their mind. I think that's the most important thing, is at some point everybody makes a decision internally to kind of commit to a coach or player. And I mean, again, there's no disgrace in making that transition. Mm-hmm. In fact, we're in a world where we need more coaches who were players. And so, now in Overwatch, in its short lifespan, and it's 3 years of existence, it's 2 years, a year and a half of experience is half of a lifetime, so certainly I feel like there's value here for players to kind of transition. And so seeing a player like Swoosh, he can kind of be an icon or a role model in that sense for other players who maybe have had that in the back of their mind. And it sounds strange, but I always felt like Swoosh would end up being a coach. He was always such a leader in the early days of any interview or any time you kind of saw Swoosh with the group. He just has a presence about him. He's rather large in stature as well, which I think maybe adds to it. But he certainly might not have been one of the marquee DPS players back in the day. And he certainly, as he transitioned to kind of more of a tank role, wasn't one of the top tanks in the league. But he's certainly a respectable player with a ton of experience, someone we've all enjoyed watching. And again, he's got a great presence. And, I hope for the best, and I hope more players realize how cool of a job it is to be a coach.
I think I'll double down on that. I mean, I wrote almost the exact same thing in my notes. He always struck me as somebody who would be a good coach. And we actually found out that he kind of coached Florida through the first season. So we learned that Tavik wasn't the only player doing double duty. as bus driver. We also got, a player that was coaching. So I think this is a good pickup for them. Obviously, it's worked out well. And I'm just happy to see him move on because I agree. Like he wasn't always the most standout player, but he always had a good personality. He always struck me as somebody that understood the game, and it's kind of like the Seagull factor. Like Seagull understands the game on a fundamentally different level than most people, and Swoosh kind of struck me as the same way. So good for them. I think Gigante as a whole have proved that they are a very talented squad. And, there was a little bit of redemption there for some other Florida players. Like we had Zupe and Zappis. And, Zupe I've never been a big fan of. Like if you go back and listen to our older shows, like I crapped on him like every chance I could get. Not just to spite Ed, but because, he was a subpar support player. But on the opposite side, I've actually always kind of been a fan of Zappis. Like I thought Zappis was a really talented tank, and I think that he could make his way back to the Overwatch League with a different team if he keeps playing at this level. So I'm happy that Gigante did take it in the.
Okay, so Spider, I do have one follow-up question about Team Gigante. Do you feel like Davin will finally be released from Contenders jail? Is it time for him to move up?
Boy, this question took me out of nowhere. Boy, I am so glad that I didn't read your notes before this show to know that was coming up. But I think Davin's the same way. Like I think he is a player that over the past, multiple Contender seasons has transitioned from role to role. He's played Tracer, he's played tanks. I think he could possibly be a mid-season pickup for Season 2 of Overwatch League for teams that need somebody with that level of flexibility. Teams like Austin, Washington, teams that we have ranked lower. So I think it's possible that we see him get out of jail. But based on prior experience, we'll see him in Contenders next season.
Yeah, if you were a betting man, it's a safer bet to just say he's going to get overlooked again. He'll be... I don't know if he'll be, like, the only one from Gigante, like, that doesn't get picked up, like, the previous time going into Overwatch League Season 1. But if that happens again, that would definitely be a feels bad moment. Well, that is not the only Contenders news that we have, because there's been a little bit of shakeups when it comes to XL2 Academy, who are, as we mentioned in the past, New York Excelsior's Contenders team. So what is going on with XL2? Well, they've gone out and they have dropped 3 of their players. They dropped Clone Man, Goliath, and most notably, Mangachu. So XL2 had recently posted a call for tryouts on their Twitter page, noting that they were looking for New York-based players to represent the team in the 2019 season. Now, they did clarify, like, hey, like, we're going to be running an online tournament. It's going to be our way to scout players, and we're interested in top 500 players that are in the tri-state area. So they're talking about New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So who's remaining on the roster for XL2 right now? Well, they have Wuyao, Tizzy, Logix, and Cher. And this is a team that they've been in the upper half of Contenders in North America. They finished in 3rd place this current season, and then in Season 2, they made it to the Grand Finals, where they just got absolutely walloped by Fusion University, who are now back-to-back-to-back champions in NA Contenders, so that is a pretty big deal. But the decision to drop established players from this team in order to make room for local talent has caused a pretty big uproar within the competitive community. So a lot of people have been asking some questions about like localization and how exactly the roster changes are going to impact the 2019 season, because they're making more of an effort to bring in local talent in Contenders. Now, the biggest misconception that is going on right now, which we absolutely have to clarify, is when it comes to non-resident talent. Now, anyone that was signed before, I don't know the exact date, but it was sometime in October of last year, and they were signed to the team, they are grandfathered in, so they do not count towards that non-resident rule in the 2019 season. So your players like Tizzy, like Huyal, will not be affected or, labeled as non-resident players. So this team is still able to pick up, an additional 2 Korean players if they so choose to do. And, it is New York. Chances are, if they're going to sign anyone, it's going to be a Korean player. So now that that's out of the way, a lot of people have been asking, well, is this a means for XL2 to cut costs? How big of a risk is this for XL2 and their parent organization? And, people are also being like, well, XL2, they automatically get a spot in contenders, so they don't really have anything to lose. So, Slamba, I want to get your thoughts on this whole situation, because the homegrown talent aspect of, competitive Overwatch or just esports across the board, has been a pretty big topic for quite some time, and we're starting to lean towards that direction. But short term, is that the best route for esports?
No. I'm going to give you a hot take here on this and say I think this is a huge mistake. I understand the intention. I love the opportunity for the romantic storyline of some locals, kind of like that movie Invincible with Mark Wahlberg, or he joins the Eagles. I get it. It sounds fun. It sounds sexy. I want to believe it. And I'm not trying to be a total curmudgeon here, but the reality is, to me, that for them to be able to find the right pieces in such a small region is insane. If you look at where individual talent comes from, it's from all over the place. When it comes to the United States, with Korea, it's a bit more concentrated into certain regions, I believe. But again, for here in the United States, we don't have a region where the best esports players come out of this region. They're from middle of nowhere sometimes. That's the glory of the internet. It's all just kind of a fair playing field at a certain point. So to kind of limit your scope and only draw a fence around, a place and say, this is where we're going to find the missing pieces for our team, even if you surround them with some top tier talent for that tier, in that range, Jer, Logix, Huyal, Tizzy, cool, great. I don't know. I feel like you're putting a lot of eggs in that basket to find the right pieces and then expect that person to be able to perform on the psychological consistency that you need a really seasoned player to do. And I don't know, you're just not going to find people with possibly as extensive esports resumes as you would if you widen your scope. So anyway, sorry. I don't know why I got a little passionate there. I'm going to calm down. But honestly, I don't think it's a great idea for the X's and O's. But it's definitely cool for the Jessup and Joes, the people out there that are going to get a shot to be somebody's. I love it.
See, this is why I love when all 3 of us are here, because I disagree completely. I think this is a good move. And I say that as being a big fan of both Clone Man and Mangachu and Goliath. I like Goliath, but I definitely followed the other 2 more closely, especially Clone Man recently, because I've been watching him to learn tank tricks. But I think Seagull had the best take on this. He to me, he basically was like, look, the non-Korean players are never going to get moved up to XL2. Sure, they had the opportunity to get picked by other teams, but who knows what buyouts are? Who knows, all the legality behind that. But realistically, those 3 players would never be on NYXL. That's just not the team NYXL has built. So with that, and what Totem said, the fact that they have the possibility of picking up possibly a couple more Korean players, why wouldn't you use those extra roster spots that are going to cost you next to nothing, because these players are going to be coming off a ladder, to build a local fan base? Because you got to remember, we're starting to look at local fan bases to generate these teams money. And, we love Overwatch. We love talking about the game Overwatch. But at the end of the day, these teams want to make money. So if they can generate a local fan base and say, these players came from down the street and come see, players from your neighborhood, that's going to generate local fan base. So I think this is a good move on the basis that they have nothing to lose in
Oh yeah, that franchise needs more fans. Like, they have such a small following right now. I'm just kidding. The more the merrier. The more the
I
merrier.
wish more franchises would have did this though, because they have nothing left to lose in season 1 of Contenders. Because I mean, if anything, we've learned that Contenders is basically like Little League to Blizzard. Like they don't, market it. They don't do that. So it's left to their own teams to market it in their hometowns. And I think this is a good way to do it. So I am sad that these 3 players got dropped. Like, don't get me wrong. I think all 3 of them are phenomenal players and deserve spots on teams. But I don't think XL2 is that team for them. Like, I think, these 3 players could go out and find another academy team, possibly like Atlanta, fit into a roster there. Maybe not with last night's leftovers, but, teams that have a much more diverse core Overwatch League team that you could see these players moving up. And look, I mean, Toronto's hinting at an academy team, so Mangachu could go there.
Or they could just sign Second Wind, who got relegated because of the damn 2019 Contenders rules.
Exactly. So as a whole, Contenders is kind of iffy, but I agree with this change from a business standpoint. As a fan standpoint, I am disappointed. So I kind of, as Slambo put it earlier with Diva, I kind of go both ways.
And I'm sorry I didn't mention the players that got affected here. I should have just want to say shout out to those players, and I wish them the best. I fixated too much on the overarching decision.
So just closing comments from me real quick on the topic at hand. For one, I don't really think New York is lacking in their presence in the area because, of everything that the Deadly Venom's crew is doing. But 2, like, chances are, like, we saw Fusion University do something like this similar, where they had picked up someone locally. That person never saw play. So we've already seen something like this already play out, but everyone seems to keep forgetting about that. So chances are, this person might be practicing in scrims here and there. They might just get some personal coaching, things like that. But the chances of them actually seeing play are actually pretty low. And a lot of people are just kind of blowing some of the other aspects of the story a little bit out of proportion. But let's go ahead, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about what is going on with visas, because there has been an issue getting visas approved. And I know recently, like, Effect mentioned that his visa hasn't been approved yet, neither has OG, so fortunately it's affecting 2 players out of the Dallas Fuel. And really, like, the biggest reason why I wanted to bring this up is because, right now the US is kind of going through a government shutdown. I'm sure if you turned on the news, you probably heard about it, or, you've seen people ranting about politics on Twitter or social media, whatever. But since we did just have the holidays...
Can I chime in real quick?
Okay.
I live right next to NSA, and the government shutdown is great because I've had no traffic since then.
Fantastic.
Beyond that, it is horrible, and that's all thing.
Yeah, so...
Real selfless attitude.
So, we recently had the holidays, so there's been a pretty big influx of travelers, so it has been kind of harder to schedule these visa appointments. And while, yes, there is a shutdown going on right now, the agency that adjudicates the visa applications, that's actually run on the fees through the applicants when they pay to file them, so all that stuff remains open. The process might be a little bit slowed down, but these things should still be going through. But that being said, guys, like, is there any part of you right now that feels concerned that visas aren't going to be issued ahead of the Overwatch League season?
I was gonna let Spider go because all I have is like to complain about my own taxes, getting my tax return, getting here on time. You're asking me if I'm worried about a couple of players from the Dallas Fuel showing up for stage 1. I got bigger fish to fry here, Toto. No, in all seriousness, I do think this is potentially a big deal. I think it's worth being worried about, and I think 2 extremely important players for that team. So no, I think that this, if it was some other names, I think we say, okay, we'll keep our eye on it. But these 2, it kind of makes you pause, and you definitely want to keep the momentum going that franchise saw at the end of last season, in the last stage. So I I don't know. I feel like this one's kind of a painful one. And I had a bad joke like right away. I'm so mean. I was like, Effect can't handle any more stress. I mean, I'm being kinder in the way I said it in my head, but he basically just crumbles, under his own stress and pressure he places on himself. So to add like external factors like visa issues is probably causing him like to go gray already. And the season hasn't even started, son. So it just doesn't help for his mental health in all seriousness.
Well, I have some good news for you, Slambo. I don't think it's going to affect your taxes because I think that was funded, as far as I understand. But as far as the visa issues, I think these players will make it over. I think it will be very close based on what we've been seeing. But we've been seeing other players that haven't had visas get visas in the last week or two. So it is a slow process. And I can't imagine that Tasmo is not up somebody's butt trying to get these players over here just on the sheer fact of what happened to Dallas last season. He doesn't want to see that repeat. Like, he wants to see the team start strong with all their players, in place. And then when they implode, he has no excuses, stuff like that. And I say that as a Dallas Fuel fan. But I hope they get this sorted out because, like you said, Effect doesn't do well under stress. OG is the tank we need currently. So as a whole, I'm not super worried about this, but like Slambo said, I'm definitely keeping an eye on it.
So moving on, as we mentioned near the top of the show, we recently had some Pro Pugs that were hosted on Jane's stream, and a lot of the Pro Overwatch League players were also streaming their perspectives. And while I wasn't able to tune into all of this, just due to the fact that there was other stuff going on that I felt was more important to me, and, we were going to cover it on the show too, but Jane was there streaming from Blizzard HQ, and, he had a couple of, he had some, pretty notable name show up on stream, that being none other than the Overwatch League Commissioner, Nate Nanzer, and we got a couple of things out of Nanzer. Well, he did note that the preseason last year was basically primarily done for, as like a dress rehearsal. It was more production, it wasn't necessarily for the players, it was more so for, working out all the kinks on the production end of it, just because for a lot of these people that were on the staff, in some instances, it was like the first time with the esports production, so it was a good way to just get their feet wet. So, the start of the season wouldn't be as much of a clusterfuck. So, the other important thing that we gotta note is, well, what's going on with preseason? So, Nanzer basically said, okay, a couple of days before the Overwatch League starts back up, so this is a month out at this point, they are going to be doing what they are calling a community countdown. Now, this is going to be kind of similar to more like fun stuff. Kind of, I don't want to say it's directly like the All-Star event, but it's not going to be necessarily, Overwatch League team versus Overwatch League team. And they were talking about maybe, we might see Anna Paintball as one of the featured modes. And one of the funniest things that I got out of that entire Pro Pugs was when I don't know if it was Nanzer that mentioned, he brought up, tanks and support players, and then you hear Surefour come in over the comms, and he's like, what about tanks and supports? We've been seeing them for the past 6 months.
I remember that, because Nanzer's like, we're trying to think of ways to get tank players and support players involved, and Surefour straight up says, we've seen them enough.
He's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He is not wrong.
So, with that being said, how do you guys actually feel about there being no preseason, and how do you think that is going to impact the expansion teams that might not necessarily have the same amount of LAN experience as some of these already established teams in Overwatch League?
Well, Nanzer never explicitly said that we wouldn't see traditional Overwatch.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to remember, there's 8 expansion teams, so they could easily block off one night where expansion teams play other expansion teams. Just make it traditional Overwatch, one night, 4 matches, which is typically what we see in a night anyway, and then you're done. And then, or you could do 2 a night and then do an Anna paintball and like Rhine boss battle, whatever they want to do. Like, I don't care. So he never explicitly said that we wouldn't see traditional Overwatch matches. He just kind of alluded that there wouldn't be every team playing in a traditional Overwatch match. And he was very like, he hammered home the point that like, do not call this a preseason. Like, it is like community countdown. Like, that's it. And like, when Jane asked him point blank, he's like, just don't call it preseason. So I think it'll be fun. I think there still is a possibility that these expansion teams get a chance to play traditional Overwatch on stage. But we'll keep an eye on this, and I'm sure they'll make their big Blizzard PR statement, within the next week or two.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure. It was just, I guess the more interesting thing that I got out of it, more so than speculation as to what we're going to get, is just the interesting piece of that I never really considered how much of a test run it was for the production, for probably the server load, for the venue. I realized that there's so many other things that go into those events that take so much planning and time and people that it probably was a great opportunity for that to make sure the product was ready to go. But at the same time, I don't know. I kind of like a traditional preseason. I think selfishly as a spectator, it's a good opportunity for us to have that traditional period of analysis to see how teams are matching up or to kind of see how rosters are going to be finalized. But at the same time, I feel like the new teams of the league are probably going to be getting in on scrims right now. And shoot, if nothing else, man, just trial by fire. We'll see which ones. At least it'll be a level playing field. None of them will get a great warm-up period and a chance to test themselves with the competition, or all of them will. So it'll be a none or all situation, and it'll be, level in that sense. And I think, if that's the case, then experience is definitely going to really be a huge factor as we look into stage one. And I wouldn't I wouldn't be surprised to see some pretty huge changes in how the standings end between stage 1 and 2, just based on some of these new franchises getting their feet wet in the Overwatch League.
So with that being said, let's go ahead and shift gears and talk a little bit about what was going down in Contenders Korea, because we are smack dab in the middle of the playoffs. So we had both semifinals here over the weekend. So Slambo, why don't you let everyone know who had made it into this season's grand finals?
Well, I'm just the messenger here, so don't shoot the messenger. But Element Mystic ended up defeating Stormquake 3-0, taking our first spot in the grand finals. And then proverbial drum roll, please. All right, the other team making it into the grand finals is Runaway, defeating WGS Armament 3-0. And frankly, just getting back to the show where they belong. Those pink jumpers are dancing in my head, Totem. They really are, though. They're fantastic. So, I guess I really just, want to say that before we kind of get too deep into the analysis, is that there is a strong comparison for me with Runaway and a team that I need to hate very soon coming up, and that's the New England Patriots, the NFL. It's a team that has shown dominance through different play styles and different rosters and different philosophies and somewhat different coaching staffs, not all the way down. And it's kind of a rough comparison because the Overwatch League is so fresh and new. But we've had Overwatch as an esport for a long time, and Runaway has been, that franchise across the pond that has consistently shown up in every tier it's competed in. So it's always been up there. Didn't always get over the hump, but it's been up there competing as a top franchise. And so I think that for this team to get this far, it's just pretty impressive, Totem. And I know we're both kind of girly Runaway fans, but I do feel like I was surprised to see them do what they did during the contender season. And I was actually more surprised to see I'm less surprised to see the outcome now, but man, pretty cool. All right, I'll shut up now. But yes, great matches.
So we started with Element Mystic going up against Stormquake, and really the biggest storyline throughout this entire series was Element Mystic and their ability to shut down triple tank, triple support with Sparkle on the Doomfist. And this is not the first time we've seen them pull that out, but Spider, we did see them kind of change up the way that they were using the Doomfist, because whenever Sparkle would go in to engage, the entire team would collapse. So, you heard the casters kind of talk about, like, well, they're kind of playing lists like Dive, which you're just not used to seeing. And Stormquake did not know how to deal with that. At one point, we did see them try to bring in a Doomfist of their own, which did not pan out. But when you're talking about the current, landscape of professional Overwatch, to have that pocket Doomfist that you can just always pull out and then have it be this effective, it's really like that trump card. And so far, no one has been able to come up with a way with how to deal with it, because there were multiple times where Sparkle on Legion Tower would basically just be on the high ground, and, he'd look to, rocket punch one of the support players. They set up a play. They would pull out the Space Jam combination, dropping the grab, the Meteor Strike, and then Stormquake time and time again was just back to the dropship. So going into the grand finals, like, that's going to be one of the biggest X factors in that series. Will Sparkle be able to have the same performance that he has had on multiple occasions on the Doomfist when he goes up against a more dominant team in Runaway? And to that extent, like, will Runaway also be able to find an answer to it? So Stormquake across the board did not. And it did seem like more times than not, a lot of what Stormquake was doing was dictated on Kaiser and how he was doing on the front line. So what were some of the things that you took away from this particular series?
They just weren't ready for that level of aggression. You can see it in the first map when they played the Doomfist comp, that Stormquake kind of understood that they were playing like a defensive Doomfist, like they were ready for, goats to rush in, and then Doomfist would try to get in the back line. And Stormquake was able to play around that. They still lost the first map, but it was very close. Like, there were multiple times that it could have went either way. The problem was exactly what you said. When they got to Hollywood, Element Mystic just flipped a switch, and they became, like, as the casters dubbed it, Reinhardt Doomfist Dive, which is a ridiculous sentence to say when you think about the heroes. But that's literally what would happen, is Doomfist would dive in, he would get bubbled, he would get Brigitte armored, and Reinhardt would be right behind him. So he would dive in, hit somebody, knock that person up, and Reinhardt would be right there waiting for him with a hammer. And that's they kept them in the spawn at Hollywood for most of their attack, Stormquake's attack. And they had no answer for it, because Kaiser is a highly aggressive tank. Like, Kaiser is very thoughtful, but he is highly aggressive in his tank play. So he didn't know how to respond to that, because he would push forward trying to make space. The problem was Doomfist would pop right in that space that he just made for his own team and then just obliterate them. So as a whole, like, a lot of attention was played to Sparkle, but I want to point out Takoyaki was the standout for me, and he's actually been the standout for me on this Element Mystic team, because he came from Open Division prior to this season, and he has just made so much room for this team. He has made, so much of a difference in this tank meta, that I think that they will give, the top tier tanks like Mag. He gave Kaiser a run for his money, stuff like that. So I think that's what it's going to come down to when we get into the finals. And you're absolutely right. It's going to come down to, can Mag keep up with Takoyaki, and can they find an answer for Sparkle's, Doomfist? And we'll see. That's all we'll have to do for there. As a whole, I think Stormquake just looked lost, like they didn't know how to handle it. And Element Mystic said, "All right, defensively, we're cutting it close. Let's work on going offensive," and that worked out great for them, because Stormquake didn't expect it, and they didn't have an answer for that. Did we lose Slambo? I feel like we lost him.
Or he's faking it.
No, he doesn't look like he's faking it right now. So.
Well, anyways, as we try to get him back from the Frozen Abyss, the wastelands. Oh,
we lost him.
rip. Oh, this is gonna look great on stream.
Our overlay.
Oh no! F it, we'll just go back to start screen for now, and we'll try to get him back. Let me just kind of... Okay, well, anyways, so the other thing that I want to point out is, out of all the maps, Volskaya Industries was the closest out of the 3. This one went to multiple time banks, and I got to the point where we got to see 3 attacks on an assault map. I know, guys, 2 CP, lol. You can also be typing NA production in chat, since, we did, in fact, lose Lambo. All good things. We will get him in ASAP, as he is typing in our Discord DM. But we saw Volskaya, we saw a lot of DPS-heavy compositions coming out from Stormquake. Slambo says he's rebooting his router. He will be right back, guys. But anyways, so what I loved about Volskaya Industries was, over time, the compositional swaps. So Stormquake, they started out running the quad DPS, trying to throw Element Mystic for a loop, and, it worked. To an extent. They eventually went down to triple DPS, opting to run additional support. And when we got to the 3rd attack, the time bank differential was pretty significant, because Element Mystic, they had very smooth attacks on the first 2. They had 328 left in the time bank. And then for Stormquake, they still had 1 minute and 15 seconds. Yeah, okay, Ed. So... what ended up happening later on with Sparkle? Well, Sparkle decided to switch things up. He was over on the Genji at one point. He went back to Doomfist. And this is where FaZe basically ended up finding Unique early on. Stormquake were able to break through to get that cap. But the problem was, with the time bank that they had, it only allowed them to get 1 attempt in on their B attack, because they had 30 seconds left on the clock at that point after they capped A. So, XCI ended up finding 2 picks, which denied the use of Trance, and Stormquake just walked away without any progress on point B. So, with Element Mystic, you had Sparkle opening things up on the backline, ended up getting 2 picks, but Proper comes in on Zarya, has high energy, and he beams right through Element Mystic at that point. But Doa, who is playing... I believe Brigitte at this point, just deletes the Reinhardt Brigitte of Stormquake, and that gave Element Mystic the first point, and they have 2 minutes left on the clock to basically close out the series, only needed 1 tick at that point. And Element Mystic, they had the ults to work with, they had both the Graviton Surge, they had the Earth Shatter. Kaiser just ends up getting locked up with the Shatter, and the follow-through was there, and, that was the closest one out of the 3 maps overall. And, we don't always get to see the triple time bank attacks or anything like that, but, when we talk about Stormquake, one of the more constant things that we talked about this season is their heavy DPS compositions, and how it opens up opportunities for them. Do you feel like a strat like that is viable on Volskaya? Or is it something similar to like the Route 66 one, where we typically only see it on that first point?
It can work. I don't think it has as much viability as it does on Route 66, just because of the way Volskaya is laid out. But it could possibly work. The problem was, and this is the problem with GOATs as a whole, that if you try that and fail, you're so far behind at that point that it just makes it hard to make a comeback. So I think this is something that, as time goes on, we might see more people experiment with, but I don't think it will be, a popular strategy. Slambo's back!
He's here.
I don't know where we are. But is it okay? Oh, okay. You guys tell me where I can jump in. Where
well, we are just wrapping up talks about Map 3, which was the Volskaya Industries between Stormquake and Element Mystic.
Perfect. Let me just toss this in real fast. I liked how Stormquake tried to set a tone early on that map, and they just came out hard with the 4 DPS comp, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, oh man, this is going to be a show. But if you watch that whole map, even though it was back and forth and it went to 6 points, the time bank was always in Element Mystic's favor. Like it always felt like it was an uphill battle for Stormquake. So while that map was competitive, it certainly wasn't as close as it once. I don't know. It just didn't feel as close as I thought it was based on the score. But it certainly was one of the best maps of the day, like from our spectator point of view.
All right, well, moving on, let's talk about the other semifinal where we saw our team run away 3-0 WGS Armament. And, I mean, really, if you want to talk about support play, oh man, the Boop City was out in full force as Li Zhangong was just booping everything in sight. Karayan, gone, booped off the side. Gives Runaway the first cap, and I have to say, like, with some of these maps, there was quite a bit of back and forth on control, but there were just some times where, Li Zhangong would just be there, he'd get a boop kill, that would open things up, give Runaway a 6v5 advantage, and then there were other times where WGS Armament just wouldn't have the ult economy or the answers for what ultimates that Runaway had at their disposal. So kind of like throughout the series, we saw some pretty like shutout wins for Runaway. Blizzard World was very one-sided. Basically, both teams tried to take that huge wraparound attack, and it got to the point where Runaway basically just, they bullied WGS off the point, and it got to the point where for WGS, they just didn't have a good way to get to the point. They were basically like cut off. Like they had no way to get to the point without just taking a lot of damage from just where they were positionally. So that was a really easy play. All they had to do was basically take Pelican out of the fight first, who was the Brigida player for WGS, and they end up demeching DPI. So the Div is out of the equation now after he got isolated, and WGS just wasn't able to approach the points. That was a very easy map for them to take. But I do want to talk.
Hey, Chodum, real quick. Can I tell you the note that I wrote?
Okay.
I said, just a question. Does Li Zhangong mean environmental kills in English? I thought it was a fair question. It just felt like.
I mean,
okay. It was a good joke to me because he was on it, that map.
It will now. I do want to talk a little bit about Temple of Anubis because we did get to see Hizu swap over to some different roles. So we saw Runaway come out with the Sombra attack, and unfortunately, it kind of backfires early on. Basically, Runaway they got split up early. Hizu got scouted. They saw where he was when he was stealthed, but they eventually do get the EMP. And Runaway's able to focus down Karayan off the back of the EMP. Mandu is there to drop the barrier, but we see the bomb come in, ends up killing Li Zhangong, and basically, like, at this point, the cap comes in for Runaway, and there's, like, 5 minutes left, and all they need to do is secure one tick. When we talk about Runaway, this is a team that defensively does not leave very many openings, and it's just very hard to even just make it to the point on Assault. But we see Hizu flex over to the Doomfist. And, again, like, very similar thing to the Sombra. He got punished on the first approach. But we saw this moment where Hizu looks to knock Karayan up in the air with the uppercut. And then Karayan just hits him with a mid-air fire strike. And just drops him. And that was, like, to me, like, out of everything that happened, outside of the environmental kills, like, that was the thing that made me just, like, laugh so hard. Because, like, as a Doomfist player, you're like, all right, we got the Reinhardt out of position, and then immediately gets punished for it. So I did really like that. But across the board, this was a total mismatch between these two teams. Runaway definitely got the easier match between all the teams out there, and it sets up for a potential back-to-back championship win, despite having a completely restructured roster. But I want to get your guys' thoughts on the series and just how your expectations for Runaway kind of evolved over time as the season progressed.
I'll be quick, Spider. I only have a couple of quick things, and that's Hisu being able to play Doomfist at a high level is something I felt like Runaway picked up over time, watching other teams, very much Element Mystic and the success that they've had with it, in particular from Sparkle. So a team that's been smart and has learned from the meta around them and not afraid to try to pick up or steal ideas from other teams. And that's what you should be doing, and not to say in a negative way. And I don't know. I guess that's just a team that I think is really fun to watch. Not really much else to add. Go Runaway.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to like our pre-Korea Contender show, we both kind of had high hopes for Runaway, but we didn't know where they'd fall. And I don't think any of us expected them to be this dominant going forward. And I think a lot of that comes off the back of what Slambo said. I think that they are a team that can take what they see and adapt it to their play style and make it work. And I think they have a talented group of players that, we really didn't know going into the season, but they've definitely proven themselves. And I think Hisu is definitely one of them because, he looks phenomenal in Zarya. We got to see him on Sombra, and sure, he had a little bit of a learning curve there at the beginning. The same thing with Doomfist. But once he kind of got into the flow of those characters, he was looking like some of the best of them. Like when he was on Sombra, he was positioning well. He landed the EMP on the targets he needed to. He was picking people off. Same thing with the Doomfist. Sure, he ate a fire strike in midair. That's highly unlucky because it's like, oh, I knocked you up in the air. You're up here with me. And Reinhardt's like, no, you're up here with me, buddy. Sorry. But if you look at the next push, is either the next one or the one after that, he was diving on the target that he needed to. He was pressuring the back line. He was doing what he needed to as Doomfist. So sure, it didn't work out initially, but he's proven that he can be that flexible player that teams will need going forward. So regardless of what is going to happen in the finals, I think we may see Runaway get poached again, depending on what happens in, mid-season and stuff like that. Sure, they probably won't go wholesale, but I'm sure we'll see some of these players get picked up as long as they're age eligible, which is always the big question. But I am happy to see them make it this far. I hope they win because they will be the first ever 2-time champions in Korea Contenders, not, plus back-to-back champions. And, we're all huge Runaway fans here. It's like the one team we agree on. So I always root for them.
All right, so with that being said, let's quickly talk about the upcoming grand finals between Element Mystic and Runaway. Primarily when it comes to things that us as observers are going to be looking at from an, analytical perspective. So, Slambo, let's start with you. What sort of battles or situations are you looking at when it comes to this grand finals match between these two teams?
So I feel like the one thing that I've tried to pick from Element Mystic as the season gone on is that early on, I felt like their aggression was punishable or more punishable. And I feel like over the course of the season, they've learned when to apply that aggression and when to be able to kind of peel it back a little bit. Certainly, based on Takoyaki, I think things really revolve around Takoyaki's play. So obviously Sparkle's a standout on the Zarya, on the Doomfist, just someone who's a WoW player that we're watching all the time. But I think that aggression and where they choose to engage and take team fights and how close that is to the enemy spawn at times, depending on the map, I think that's going to be something that Runaway is going to punish. And again, I think they've worked themselves out of that habit, Element Mystic. But I believe that if they show any bit of that aggression or put themselves into a closer position because they believe they're winning the ultimate battle, I just feel like Runaway will punish them. And I feel like that's kind of what you need to watch for in this matchup, is how far Element Mystic tries to push it when they're up and how much Runaway is going to punish that. And I mean that from no matter what the map type is. It's going to come down to watching how far off the objective, or again, how close to that spawn door Element Mystic is choosing to set up. And then, again, I feel like Takoyaki because of where the team puts themselves in certain situation, comes across as looking like he sometimes makes some poor plays or goes down first, becomes a target. But I think that's, again, more around the team positioning. And I don't know. I think Runaway is going to have a way more of a challenge than they did this week. But I don't know. I think they're going to come out on top. I think they're going to be able to punish that aggression. Or it's going to make Element Mystic curl up into a shell of themselves and not play their usual game, not have that same confidence, that same pressure because of their opponent. So, I don't know. That's where I'm at.
I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier. I think if Runaway can take Element Mystic out of their element, like take Sparkle basically out of his gameplay style, make Sparkle play to Runaway style, I think Runaway will have an easy game with this. Because as much as, I love Sparkle on the Doomfist, he's an okay Zarya. Like, he's good, but he's not as good as Hisu. And Hisu can still flex. I think what Runaway wants to avoid is I think they don't want to try to match Element Mystic. Like, I don't want to see the Doomfist versus Doomfist. I don't want to see that. I want to see Runaway stick to their play style, which unfortunately is a lot of goats. They can flex to Sombra and Doomfist when needed, but mostly they stick to goats. And I think they need to, control the tempo of that because I think if they can keep Sparkle on his toes, I think the rest of the line on Runaway, like player for player, can beat it out. Like I think Mag versus Takoyaki is a good matchup, but I would still give the advantage to Mag. Same thing with Hisu and stuff like that. So it really comes down to, can they keep Sparkle off of Doomfist? I think if they can keep him off of Doomfist, like basically punish him, I think Runaway will have an easier time with this. But it's going to be a hell of a match, no matter what happens.
Yeah, so when I look at this, yes, the Doomfist is going to be like a big X factor, because basically whenever Sparkle is on Doomfist, it basically kind of like forces the will of the other team. But whenever we see Element Mystic run traditional GOATS compositions, Sparkle is having a harder time earning Graviton Surges before the enemy Zaryas, and if this comes down to mere compositions in that regard, Runaway shouldn't really be dealing with too many issues outperforming Element Mystic. Now that being said, I'm glad you brought up, like, you don't want to see Hisu try to match or outperform Sparkle when it comes to that Doomfist role, because this is something we've actually already seen play out during the regular season when Element Mystic went up against GC Busan Wave, who have one of the DPS prodigies in Edison. Edison was like, okay, what do we do? Okay, let's F it. Let's run a Doomfist of our own. He's a really good DPS player, and what Sparkle is able to do on that role, no one can match. And I don't want to see Runaway get suckered into trying to outpace them in that regard. So I'm hoping that Runaway either finds an answer or gets an early pick that scares Sparkle off of that role, because for Runaway to really take this, like we're hoping they need to have mirror GOATS compositions. Now, that being said, for me, one of the other key things I'm going to be looking at is the positioning of the front line. Because, while, yes, Takoyaki has been good across the board, there have been times where his positional spots have been just the wrong area on the map, or maybe he gets focused down early with a lot of shield pressure, and we've even seen him get benched in the quarterfinals. So, we always talk about frontline presence, so that's another thing to kind of keep an eye on. And the other thing I do want to note is XCI, who is, this is a player that played DPS for Element Mystic last season. He has now been kind of on that like a flex role. We saw him on Zenyatta. I know he was playing on the Hollywood map, and he's a very high risk, high reward player in a sense that he has the ability to play hit scan, but when we've seen him on that Zenyatta role, his inexperience at that role was super evident, because I remember when the doors opened on Hollywood, as soon as they opened, he got picked off. He got punished. So there's just been times where you definitely can see, he's out of his element. So I feel like for Element Mystic, while yes, having XEI in the composition might open up the possibility for DPS-heavy comps, I feel like that's too much of a risk to be playing in the grand finals of a major LAN tournament. So that's pretty much the key things I'm going to be looking at, but I also want to note that there's a very good opportunity for disruption from the backline themselves, because you have both Unique and Li Gon, who have both been known to show their prowess in that regard on Lucio. So just so many different ways you can kind of look at how some of these fights can be broken down. So definitely looking forward to the grand finals. And, who knows, maybe Runaway will be back-to-back champions with two completely different teams. Like, that would be absolutely crazy as Slambo's webcam cuts off. Oh no!
He's gone again.
He's gone again. Well, fine. Well, okay. Slambo says, dude, WTF. I don't know, Slambo. I don't have all of the answers for you. But what I do have are our Season 2 host rankings for our Overwatch League teams. And we'll be starting with the number 15 slot. And hopefully, Slambo is going to return to us. Like, we can see he's online, but we just don't see his webcam.
He's talking to us from the abyss.
He is, apparently. But anyways, Spider, let's start with our 15th ranked Overwatch League team. So why don't you start us off? Who do you have in that 15th position?
I have the newly expanded Paris Eternal. I think, the Paris team look good. They definitely have a high pop-off potential with, Soon and Shadowburn. But they are untested. So, I kind of had to put them there. I think their core tanks are good. I think Ben Best and Fincy, if they work out together, could be very scary. But like I said, they're untested, so I kind of have to weight them, middle bottom type of team. And I look forward to them doing well, because they will increase EU representation if they do well. But yeah, I put them at 15.
Yeah, you and I are both in agreement on this regard, because I also have the Paris Eternal at the 15th position. And, for me, like, I feel like a lot of this is going to boil down to, well, how strong of a region do you think Europe is? Now, kind of going into Season 1, we talked about Florida Mayhem, and, they had picked up the Misfits, who were one of the more dominant EU teams at the time, and then they worked with the bare minimum. They didn't really have a coaching staff to kind of shit the bed, and they ended up, completely restructuring the entire team. So Europe, I have to say it, when it comes to contenders, Europe has always been the closest region, talent-wise, when it comes to the team aspects of it. And there is good talent there. The question is, can an all-EU team actually win in the Overwatch League? And I feel like, to that, you have to say, well, that degree of success will be a huge variety depending on who you actually have. I feel like the DPS score on this team, I was like, okay, yeah, they have some great DPS players. Danye, I have been a huge fan of. Soon getting traded from LA Valiant, that's kind of been a big discussion point, because a lot of people are kind of low-balling where they feel like the Valiant is going to be this season. But, Soon has been very hit or miss. And there's also been the Shadowburn question. Shadowburn looked great at times, but then EQO came in, and then Shadowburn just fell into the abyss. So I'm curious to see how motivated he is going to be to really show up and kind of prove his worth as a DPS mainstay on the team. So the DPS line for me isn't something that's a question. It's more so on the tank line. Finzi, he didn't really see a ton of play for the Valiant. LH Cloudy has looked good at contenders, but we haven't really seen him at that high level, so it's really hard to kind of gauge where he is going to be. And Ben Best, he's kind of in a similar position. So, for me, I'm a huge Cruz fan. I've been a Reunited fanboy since the get-go, and their 1,800 reiterations of that team, regardless of what name they're under. So Cruz is going to have to be the backbone of the support line, and I don't think you can put all your eggs in one basket in any one line, and I feel like that's really where Paris Eternal is going to retract when it comes to where they're going to fall in our rankings. So for now, I feel like it's great that, EU has another team. They got a lot of EU representation on the team itself. That's good and bad in some retrospects, but right now, I'm not completely sold on Paris. But, Slambo, you are here, so why don't you tell us where you have, or who you have, in the 15th slot for your Overwatch League rankings.
In the 15th spot, I do have the Guangzhou Charge. So that is bringing up the number 15 on my list. I'm not sure, Spider and Totem, if you both have already gone. I think I'm the only one of us three with Guangzhou in 15.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
If you want to know why, it's because of communication. I think it comes down to that, and that's pretty much it. Is that okay? I'm trying to keep this quick. Yeah, I don't know what you guys covered, so I'm not trying to be too repetitive here. You know what I mean?
Well, that is fine, because I actually have the Guangzhou Charge in my 14th slot. So, we're looking at this team. We got to see them a little bit in the Pacific Showdown when they face the Seoul Dynasty. And, communication is definitely going to be one of the bigger things at play with this team. And I don't want to base everything off of what we saw in the show match, but that's also, the only time we've actually seen them play so far. This DPS lineup has a lot of potential. This is a team of playmakers, and I feel like out of the gate, the Charge might be on the lower half of the league, just in terms of getting their feet underneath them, but their potential, out of the teams that I have in this particular bracket, I feel like exceeds some of the other teams that we are going to be talking about. So this is a team that early on, might be riding the struggle bus, but this team, out of the expansion teams, when we talk about, maybe the teams that are on, the second half of our rankings, this is a team that I feel like has the best potential to break out and potentially be a contender in some Sage playoffs.
Well, I do not have the Guangzhou Charge at 14. I have Houston Outlaws because they didn't really make any additions in the offseason outside of Dante.
Mm-hmm.
And they got rid of their best Zarya player, which is Spree, which Zarya is highly important right now. And I still think they're highly meta dependent. They've kind of filled the Tracer need, sure. But I talked about it previously. Coolmat has kind of fallen out of favor. He was kind of declining there as the off tank position got more and more important, and going into stage 1 off tank is going to be very important, regardless of if they stick him on Diva or Zarya. So I just feel like the Outlaws aren't the team that they need to be going into this meta. And I still think they have some talented players. They have, some big brain players, but I don't think they have the assets needed to be a top 10 team.
And I will say that it's funny. My 14th team was the Paris Eternal, which you guys just talked about. And I feel like bold prediction here, just to kind of add, is that I feel like Ben Best may arrive as a quietly good tank player this season. Got a lot of experience coming into it. I think he's got a lot of talent around him. I don't have super high expectations for the Paris Eternal, but I think against mediocre to worse competition, I think Ben Best has a chance to be, maybe a standout player. I'm just trying to make a bold prediction here.
All right, well, moving on to my 13th slot, I have the Atlanta Reign. Okay, so here's the thing. So we have the former tank duo of Element Mystic. Fantastic. Gator, I don't think is going to see play. He is relegated to being on Atlanta Academy, aka last night's leftovers. He's going to be protecting our boy Sugar Free as he is looking to become of age couple years down the line. We got some time. But maybe Gator, will help keep Atlanta at the level that they've been at the contenders level. But for now, I don't expect to see a ton of play from him in the Overwatch League, unless we are going to be seeing a ton of Reinhardt play, because I do feel like he is in a better position to play that role on this lineup. But, you also kind of have to think of, well, does being better at that specific role mean that he's going to have better synergy with a duo that's been taken together on another team? Probably not. I'd rather take the synergy over a slightly better player at that specific role. So, you have the wild card of Defran. That's probably the best way to describe him, because, well, we don't know if he's going to get himself suspended. That's a risk that you're going to be running, having Defran on the team. But, Atlanta, I like the staff behind this team. I feel like out of all the personalities, Defran might be the likeliest to be able to stay in tow. So, I don't have too many concerns with their DPS line. And Kodak, we talk about Fragons and Yadas in the league. Kodak is going to be able to turn things up quite a bit. So I'm not I'm not going to say Atlanta is going to be the best expansion team out there, but I'm really excited to see what this team can do, because this one has that more unknown quality and factor to them at most positions, as opposed to where maybe one team might only have a wild card at a DPS line or on a tank line, but it's not spread out across all three.
Yeah. For 13, I have the Guangzhou Charge, basically for the reasons you guys stated earlier. They have a decent Metabella core, Metabellum. They have some, powerhouse DPS, but, they got a little bit of work on synergy. So they could be, Season 1 Philly, or they could be Season 1 Florida. So they could go either way, so that's kind of where I put them where they are.
And then I had the Rain as well, so me and Totem are aligned there. And Defran is going to be... He'll be definitely a sideshow. He will get some playing time, but I'm not sure he's going to be getting the majority of the reps, if you will.
All right. Well, let me do 12, since my 12 is Atlanta Rain, so I'll just get that out of the way. I think they have a decent front line, like Totem said. I think their DPS line is insane. If you look at the players individually, Defran, Erster, and Nalir, they are all, top 5 on the ladder DPS players. Hopefully that translates to pro play. Probably won't, but it could. So I put them at 12, just because I'd like to see Defran get some redemption, but he could get suspended at the same time I say that. So I hope they do well, but I put them at 12.
All right, well, at number 12, I have the Houston Outlaws, and, this team added Dante, who was traded from the Shock. Other than that, most of the pieces are still there. The only person that they really dropped was Fact Fiction, who is in contenders now, and they reassigned a couple players like Clockwork, Mendo Kusai, but, Mendo wasn't even on the team, really. He was there for, the watch parties, and content curation. Now he's probably streaming, and that's probably the only thing he's gonna be doing with the Outlaws, just because you can say anything you want about Mendo. There were times where he maybe just didn't want to play, or maybe he just didn't feel like he was ready. Whatever the reason, Mendo was bench boy, just like he was on Team Bench Boys in the past. But they have Linkser still. They kept Jake, Colmet, Spree, Muma, Boink, Bonnie, Raucus, Arhan. They have a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and Season 1, at times, the metas weren't the kindest to the Outlaws. Now, what I will say is, with those specific metas, I feel like the Outlaws were probably the easiest team to kind of isolate that the metas were an issue, as opposed to some of the other teams. So some of the holes on this team were more noticeable than others. Maybe the exception to that, who were more evident, were the Shock, we're probably the best team that we're exposed to the given metas. But I feel like, as long as Zarya is playing a major component, you can't really count out the Outlaws. And a lot of people are just looking at Dante with like, oh, well, okay, you patched one of the glaring issues in Season 1. You got yourself a Tracer player. Well, hey, guess what? Tracer's not really in the meta. A lot of people are just fixated on Tracer when it comes to Dante, when we've seen him flex outside of just that specific hero. So I feel like a lot of people going into this new season are going to be sleeping on the Outlaws, not only because of the fact that this team didn't really bring on a lot of new pieces, but a lot of people are also just downplaying the effect that Dante's flexibility can bring to the team.
And I will say, just because I do have the Outlaws at 12 also, is that I feel like Tyrong is an underrated coach. He was in my picks, one of the best coaches going into Season 1 because of his experience with the Korean teams in the World Cup and his pedigree there. So I certainly think that a good coach, definitely given more time and now in one season under the belt, and with a roster with a ton of experience. I mean, the names you kept reading, Totem, names, ton of perennial names as well. So I do feel like this team has a good shot to be competitive. And I think being ranked where we have them, 12th, it sounds low, but it's not. Because, I think the teams like between 12 and 8 to 7 are all pretty dang close. Mm-hmm. So to me, I feel like this is where we start to get to an upper echelon of team when we talk about the Houston Outlaws here at this spot.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that would bring us up to number 11, and I have Shendu Dranthera, aka the Shanghai Dragons. So I feel like outside of the Valiant, the team that has a lot of people kind of unsure is the Dragons. This is a team that had the biggest overhaul out of all the teams. They dropped a number of players. They did end up keeping 3 other players, so they kept Dia, they kept Fearless, Kagiri, and they added a lot of Kondu Panthera, who were the runner-ups, who lost to Runaway last season in Contenders Korea in that epic 8-map series. And again, I'm going to say it every time, if you guys have not watched that Grand Finals from Season 2 Contenders Korea, absolutely go watch it. You will not be disappointed. It's probably the best Overwatch match that we've had ever. But Shanghai Dragons and this Kondu Panthera squad, KDP versus Runaway was razor close. Like, there's really like no love lost when it comes to KDP. So for me, a lot of this is just going to boil down to that pre-existing synergy and how they're going to perform. So if I'm talking about Overwatch League rookies who are very strong candidates at walking away with, an award at the end of the season, at the end of the season, DM is easily one of the top people to look at in the league, outside of like maybe Decay would probably be the other person who would rank right next to him. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing that eventual Carpe versus DM showdown, which a lot of us are looking forward to. But Shanghai, I feel like they made the right choices when it comes to the restructure. Really, the only one that, we were kind of we're kind of split on was when they had dropped Otto, who ended up signing with Washington Justice. So, he's got a good opportunity there. But I feel like Shanghai, this is not going to be an 0-28 team. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're going to win right out of the gate, but this is a team that is going to win matches in the first stage. And hopefully at that point, maybe they'll kind of like lose that lovable loser aspect of the Shanghai Dragons, and people will start to take them seriously, as opposed to just being like more of a laughingstock type team, because that's kind of like the vibe that they had in Season 1. Because okay, we're just gonna tune in, maybe they'll get the win, and sure, they almost beat Florida, and the viewership spiked, but they couldn't finish. And hopefully, with that LAN experience of KDP, that is going to be a drastic uptick in the overall performance for this roster.
Yeah, so first I want to say you're right. Outlaws didn't drop Spree. For some reason, I thought they did. So my apologies there. But it changes almost nothing of what I said before, other than they'll have a slightly better Zarya player. So I would not rank them any differently with that knowledge. For my 11th spot, I have the San Francisco Shock, and this is going to be highly divisive because if you remember last season, I was the Shock's like supporter. Like I was like, they have a talented team.
We've swapped roles here.
I know it's a bizarro world, but after watching season 1 and watching World Cup, I'm gonna say the Shock's DPS core is overrated. Like I don't think they're nearly as good as people make them out to be. Are they talented? Yes. Are they as talented as people say they are? No. And that's what took them out of the top 10 for me, because other than that, I think the Shock are a highly, highly competitive team. Super and Choi Hobin are great tanks. Plus, they picked up Smurf. Nevix is still on the team. All great, tank and flex tank players. They have a strong support core with Moth and Sleepy. They added Violet, who is also a strong support player. It's really the DPS core. Like, the DPS core has not lived up to the expectations that we expected from them. Will that matter going into a GOATS meta? Maybe not. But it will matter eventually. So I don't think they are a top 10 team going forward. I hope to be proven wrong, because I still would like this team to succeed, because this is kind of, one of the few teams that have retained American players. So I would like to see them succeed, but I had to rank them 11th because none of the DPS players, I look at them and say, wow, I wish that guy was on my team. Except for maybe Arhan. Because I have the shirt on.
Dang.
Not Arhan. Who? Never mind. It's late here. It's almost midnight.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I'm tired and it's 9 o'clock for me. I have no excuse, frankly. So anyway, no, I do have the Shanghai Dragons as well here at 11, and I think the Kungdu influence certainly is the story. It's nice they kept a few players, and Gegri will certainly see some playing time, I think. But overall, I just feel like the synergy that team's going to have. I don't know. I'm being conservative with keeping them at 11. I think that eventually they're going to kind of move up the rankings fairly swiftly as stages move forward. Once they get their legs really secure here on American soil.
All right, so that would bring us to yeah.
Architect.
Spider was looking for architect.
Architect.
They both have R at the start of their name.
Listen, it's late. I'll allow
It's midnight here. Come on.
Well, anyways, at the number 10 position, or actually, I don't even know why I marked down, because we're done.
We're supposed to stop.
Whatever. Okay. No, it's cool.
Oh no. All right.
I was like, wait a
everyone
minute.
Made a mistake tonight. Yay.
Woohoo. Anyways,
Totem.
so that was 15 through 11. Next week, we'll go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Then eventually we'll get to our top 5. And then at that point, we will release our average out rankings between all of the network hosts, which will include a couple of new hosts, which I will talk about here, in a couple of minutes. But anyways, let's close out the show for tonight so you guys can get to bed. And, we can go edit this. So if you guys want to help us out, the best way to show us some support is to leave us a review over on iTunes. We're always looking for ways to improve the show to make for a better listening experience for you guys. We do have Overwatch Recall. That is our hub of Overwatch content, whether it's Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro podcast, and you can find that on our website. And then every Sunday night, we release episodic listens of all the latest content. So find Recall on Twitter at OWRecall. And hopefully we'll have some new interviews lined up here shortly. We do have our Patreon page, which recently launched. So if you guys want to help us out further, that is the best way to directly support the show. So that'll help us grow the network further, which it's already doing. And also improve on some of the stuff behind the scenes. So we are offering 4 different tiers, starting at just $1 a month, and you can learn more by visiting our page at patreon.com/OWL Network. So thank you so much to our new Patreons who are Grindcore and It's Evil John, who's been hanging out with us tonight on Twitch. So thank you so much for your continued support, guys. We greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, we do have a new podcast that is starting tomorrow. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that we'll be live for our episode 0 recording, but our Fantasy Overwatch League podcast, which still does not have a name, so I'm not going to throw it out there, but we'll be sitting down and recording episode 0 tomorrow, so as soon as we got a feed up, our iTunes artwork, all that good stuff, you guys will be sure to know about it, but it will have myself as the host, we'll have Blaze and Bob from our recap, Ed and R will be there from Heroes Never Die, and then we have Julian, who is going under his Discord name. So all that will be starting very soon, so thank you guys so much for the support, and we look forward to doing some Fantasy Overwatch League with the community moving forward. But with that being said, Slambo, there are a number of different ways that our listeners and community can get a hold of us, so why don't you let them know where they can find us?
Sure thing. You guys can toss us an email if you want. contact@owlnshow.com. Both our Twitter and our Instagram feeds are at @OWLNshow. Our website, www.owlnshow.com. We're on YouTube. Officially got that link. So youtube.com/C/Overwatch League Network, all written out. You can find us on Discord, discord.me/OWLNshow. Also, our Twitch is twitch.tv/OWLN show. We are a Twitch affiliate, so make sure you guys toss us that additional support for the show by hitting that subscribe button on the channel. And you guys get our awesome network emoticon when you do that. So just a reminder of our shows weekly on Twitch. You got Overwatch League Network, the show you're listening to now, live Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. We have Fantasy Overwatch League podcast, as Totem just mentioned. Not necessarily live for the first one, but coming soon on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. Then we've got the standard Heroes Never Die, our variety Overwatch show, Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And always check out our host streams when they are available, usually Thursdays and Fridays around 7:30 Pacific time. And just another reminder of our wonderful Patreon link that is pretty new, and we appreciate all the support so far. That's patreon.com/OWL network. All right. What about the social medias, boys? Where can they find you?
Well, I am over on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR, and of course, guys, if I am live on Twitch, it will always be here on our podcast network channel. But Spider, what about you?
You can find me at SpiderGD on Twitter, and same thing if I'm on Twitch, usually here.
And at SlamOverwatch on Twitter. Don't even bother with Twitch. Love y'all.
All right, well, with that being said, guys, thank you so much again for tuning in to Overwatch League Network. Again, this has been episode number 63. I am Totally Drunk, joined by both of my co-hosts, Slambo and Spider, and we hope to see you guys back on Wednesday for our next episode of Heroes Never Die. But until then, guys, have a good night.
Thank you for listening to the Overwatch League Network. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at OWLN Show. The theme music for OWLN is the main theme and victory theme guitar remix by Michael Mack.